Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. Today we're going to be tackling something that I think a lot of parents struggle with. It's how to discipline toddlers without resorting to those things that we all know we shouldn't do, like hitting or yelling,
Yeah, those can be really tough moments.
for sure. And we've got some great resources to help us navigate this, articles, expert advice, even some insights from different cultural perspectives.
Yeah.
So we're really going to get a well-rounded view of this topic.
That's fantastic. And I think it's so important to start by really rethinking how we view discipline in the first place. It's not about control. It's not about forcing our kids to do what we want. It's about guiding them. It's about understanding where they are developmentally and helping them learn self-control,
Hmm.
which takes time.
Absolutely. And speaking of reframing, something that really jumped out at me from the sources was this idea, and this came up a lot in the advice from Dad University and Emma Hubbard, that we often equate discipline with punishment. But is punishment really the answer? I mean, does it really work?
It's such a common misconception, right? I mean, we think, oh, they did something wrong, so they need to be punished. But the research really shows that harsh punishments, whether it's physical or verbal, they're not only ineffective, but they can actually be harmful.
And we have some great sources that back this up. The American Academy of Pediatrics, the Taibatsu Hibatsu Handbook.
Hmm.
They both talk about this.
And we're not just talking about spanking here.
Right.
Yelling in harsh words can be just as damaging.
Yeah, that was something that really stood out to me. It's not just about the physical stuff.
Right, because those tactics, they just focus on stopping the behavior right then and there. But they don't teach the child anything about making better choices in the future.
Which brings us to understanding toddler development. And this is where things get really interesting, because sometimes it feels like they're speaking a different language.
Oh, absolutely. They're little aliens.
Totally. But seriously, several of the sources, the Child Mind Institute, the Happiest Baby articles, they all emphasized how crucial this is. We have to understand where they're coming from developmentally to be able to guide them effectively.
Right, because toddlers, they're still developing their understanding of cause and effect. Their attention spans are super short, and their emotional regulation skills, well, those are still in their early stages.
So it's not that they're intentionally being defiant or trying to manipulate us. They just don't get it yet.
Exactly. They're exploring, testing boundaries. They're trying to figure out how the world works.
It's like a science experiment gone wrong sometimes.
Totally. And they're learning through trial and error, which means we need a lot of patience.
And this is where I get excited, because there are so many positive alternatives to punishment out there. The sources are packed with them. Redirection, positive reinforcement, validating feelings.
Yeah. And it's about meeting them where they are developmentally and giving them the tools to make better choices.
Mhm. And I love how many different sources highlight these techniques. The bump, what to expect, even the Muslim Parents Guide.
And I think these approaches really get at the heart of what effective discipline is. It's guiding and teaching, not controlling through fear or punishment. So instead of yelling at a child for jumping on the couch, you might calmly redirect them to a more appropriate activity, like playing with their toys.
Right, giving them something else to focus that energy on.
And when you see them making those good choices, even small ones, that's where positive reinforcement comes in.
Catch them being good, as they say.
Exactly. Praising them for sharing a toy, helping clean up, it can be incredibly powerful, even for a toddler.
Now let's talk about timeouts,
Hmm.
because I know this is a topic that a lot of parents have questions about.
Yeah.
There's some strong opinions out there.
Yeah, timeouts can be a really helpful tool, but it's all about how they're used. The key is to frame them as a way to help the child regulate their emotions, not as a punishment.
And the Nemours Kids Health article, along with those American Academy of Pediatrics resources, they have a lot of good information about this.
Keep them short, explain the reason clearly and simply, create a safe and calming space for them.
So it's like hitting the pause button on the
Yeah.
situation, both for the child and for the parent.
Exactly. It gives everyone a chance to breathe and reset. And, a related concept that I think is really important to touch on is natural and logical consequences.
This is where the child experiences a direct result of their actions.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. So, for example, if a child throws a toy and it breaks, well, that's a natural consequence. Or if they're using a toy to hit, you might take the toy away for a little while. It helps them learn the connection between their actions and the outcomes.
Okay. So we've talked about redirection, positive reinforcement, timeouts, natural consequences. What about when we as parents mess up? Because
Right.
let's be real, we all lose our cool sometime.
Right. Oh, absolutely. We're human. We're not perfect. And I love how the Bump article really emphasized this. When we make mistakes, we need to apologize to our children.
Wait, seriously, we're supposed to apologize to a toddler?
Yes, even to toddlers. It teaches them about taking responsibility for our actions, and it also helps to build that trusting relationship, which is so vital for effective discipline, because it shows them that we're not perfect. We make mistakes, and we can learn from them.
I love that. It's not about being perfect parents. It's about being authentic,
Exactly. And that authenticity also extends to how we communicate with our toddlers.
which is something that the articles from Very Well Family and Emma's Diary had some great insights on.
They talked about the importance of clear and concise communication and how overwhelming it can be for toddlers when we bombard them with long explanations.
So less is more when it comes to talking to toddlers.
Keep it short and sweet, and think about using do's instead of don'ts.
Like instead of saying don't hit, you might say use gentle hands.
Exactly. It's about guiding them towards positive behaviors instead of just telling them what not to do.
And I think that's a perfect segue into our next section because we're going to be talking more about how to stay calm and regulate our own emotions when those little buttons are being pushed.
Which is not always easy, let me tell you.
Not at all.
Yeah.
So stay tuned. We'll be right back after a quick break. Okay, so we're back. And we were just talking about how important it is for us as parents to regulate our own emotions when we're dealing with those challenging toddler moments.
Right. Because let's face it, it's so easy to get caught up in the heat of the moment.
Oh, totally.
Mm.
I mean, I've definitely had those times where I've lost my tool and reacted in a way that I later regretted.
And that's completely normal. We're all human. But the key is to develop our own self-regulation skills so that we can respond to those challenging situations in a more thoughtful way.
So we're basically trying to regulate our own emotions while we're trying to help our toddlers regulate theirs.
Exactly. And this is where I think Nicolene Peck's videos on self-government are so helpful. She talks about creating a calm down spot for both the parent and the child.
I love that because how can we expect our kids to calm down if we're not modeling that behavior ourselves?
Exactly. And it goes beyond just having a physical space. It's about having strategies in place for managing our own stress and frustration.
Right? Like deep breaths, counting to 10, whatever works for you.
And speaking of strategies, consistency was another theme that came up a lot in the sources.
Yeah, the bump, what to expect, chats with Flo, they all talked about how important it is to be consistent with our discipline.
And it makes sense.
Right.
If we're constantly changing the rules or giving in to tantrums sometimes, our kids are getting mixed messages.
It's like we're eroding their trust in us. They need to know what to expect.
Exactly. They need those clear boundaries.
And remember, discipline isn't just about reacting to negative behaviors. It's also about proactively teaching and reinforcing positive behaviors.
And that's where rewards and positive reinforcement come in.
Right. I'm a big fan of positive reinforcement. It's amazing how much more effective it can be than punishment.
Absolutely. And there are so many ways to do it. The What to Expect article talked about creating reward systems, using praise to encourage good behavior. But even simple things like a high five, a hug, just acknowledging their effort can go a long way.
Okay, but what about those moments when it feels like nothing is working? You know when your toddler is having a full-blown meltdown, screaming, kicking, the whole 9 yards.
Tantrums. Ah, yes. Joys of toddlerhood.
They're definitely challenging. But I guess it's important to remember that they're a normal part of development.
Right? Absolutely. It's how they express their frustration when they don't have the words to do so.
So what's the best way to handle a tantrum? Do we try to stop it? Ignore it.
Well, several of the sources, including the Numbmore's Kids Health article, suggested ignoring the behavior as much as possible, as long as the child is safe, of course. Giving in to the tantrum only reinforces that this behavior is an effective way to get what they want.
Right. It's like giving them a reward for having a meltdown.
Exactly. And even though you're ignoring the behavior, you can still validate their feelings.
So you're not just dismissing them, you're acknowledging that they're upset.
Right. You can say something like, I know you're frustrated, but we don't throw things when we're angry. And sometimes you might need to remove them from the situation, either with a timeout or by taking them to a quiet space to calm down.
That makes me think of the Hoppa family video. They had some interesting ideas about creating a calm and peaceful home environment, incorporating things like Montessori principles.
Yeah, they talked about the importance of giving children choices and encouraging independence, which can actually go a long way in preventing power struggles.
That makes sense. If they feel like they have some control over their environment, they're less likely to act out.
Exactly. So instead of dictating what they wear, you might offer them 2 options to choose from. It gives them a sense of ownership over the decision.
And those little choices can make a big difference.
They really can. And we've covered a lot of ground here, but I think if we had to boil it all down to one key takeaway, it would be this.
What's that?
It all comes back to building that strong and loving relationship with your child. It's the foundation for everything else we've talked about.
Connection, not control.
Exactly. And that's what makes this whole conversation about positive discipline so much more than just a set of rules or techniques. It's about creating a nurturing environment where our children feel safe to express themselves, to make mistakes,
Yeah.
and to grow into confident and capable individuals.
Yeah, and even though we're specifically talking about disciplining toddlers, I feel like these principles apply to all of our relationships, not just the ones with our kids.
Oh, absolutely. It's about understanding human behavior,
Yeah.
communicating effectively, building strong connections. Those are valuable skills no matter who you're interacting with.
This has been such a thought-provoking conversation.
Yeah.
I'm already thinking about how I can apply these ideas in my own life.
Me too. And I think it's important to remember that this is a journey, not a destination. We're all constantly learning and growing as parents, and that's okay.
As we wrap up this deep dive, one thing that really stuck with me was something from the Taibatsu Obatsu handbook.
Oh, yeah.
They talked about the importance of focusing on the child's dignity, even when they're misbehaving.
It's such a powerful reminder, isn't it?
It really is.
Even our youngest humans deserve respect and understanding. And
Absolutely.
I think it ties into what so many of the sources emphasized, moving away from punishment and toward teaching and guiding.
Right, like that point in the Discipline the Basics PDF.
Yeah.
About how physical punishment can actually teach kids that aggression is an acceptable way to solve problems.
Oh, for sure.
That's the opposite of what we want.
Exactly. And it's not just physical punishment, right? Yelling harsh words can be just as damaging.
Yeah, for sure.
The doctors actually had a whole segment on this, highlighting how yelling can actually be as harmful as spanking.
Wow, I didn't realize it was that serious.
It is.
So if we're not supposed to yell or hit, what are we supposed to do when we're feeling overwhelmed, frustrated, when our buttons are being pushed to the limit?
Well, that's where those self-regulation skills we talked about earlier become so crucial.
Right.
Remember Nicolene Peck's advice about taking a moment to calm down before responding?
Yeah.
That pause, it can make all the difference.
It's so much easier said than done, though.
Oh, absolutely. It takes practice. But, think about it this way. We're not just teaching our children how to behave. We're teaching them how to be in the world. We're their first and most important teachers.
That's a lot of pressure.
It is. But it's also an incredible privilege. And remember, we don't have to be perfect, right?
Oh, thank goodness.
We just have to be present, and we have to be willing to learn and grow alongside our children.
One of the things I found really encouraging from all these sources is that there's no one right way to discipline.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many different approaches and techniques. What works for one family might not work for another.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important to find what resonates with you and your values.
Right.
Whether it's drawing from cultural wisdom, incorporating different parenting philosophies, or just simply focusing on positive reinforcement and clear communication. There are so many options to explore.
And the good news is there's a ton of support available for parents who are feeling lost or overwhelmed.
Yeah.
There are so many resources out there,
There are.
from articles and books to experts in parenting communities.
Right. And let's not forget about the importance of connecting with other parents, too.
Yeah.
Sharing experiences and seeking advice from people who have been there. It can be incredibly helpful.
It really does take a village.
Exactly. We're all in this together.
Yeah.
And remember, you're doing a great job. Parenting is tough, but it's also incredibly rewarding.
So true. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with this. How can you take the insights we've discussed today and tailor them to fit your unique family dynamic? What resonates with you? What feels authentic to your parenting style?
Yeah, that's a great question. And remember, the journey of parenthood is ongoing.
It is.
There will be challenges, there will be triumphs, and there will be endless opportunities for growth and learning.
That's for sure.
Embrace the journey, seek out support when you need it, and most importantly, don't forget to enjoy those precious moments along the way.
Beautifully said. Well, that wraps up our deep dive into disciplining toddlers without hitting or yelling. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.